So to have a financially well life or financial wellness, we actually have to step out of the norm. And that in itself can be, especially in the first stages, I'll say only really in the first stages, psychologically very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that we have to deprive ourselves. And that's a bit of a misnomer where people will say, well, it's all about deferred gratification. So you defer the purchase now so you can be
Mm-hmm.
happy later.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of this is that the purchase itself doesn't make us happier. We really don't know what makes us happy. Daniel Kahneman talked about this. He's a behavioral psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. And he said, we do not know what will make us happy. And therein lies the root to so many of the problems.
Hi, my name is Luella Young. I'm a psychotherapist and coach. And if you're interested in how your lifestyle is affecting your mental health, then you're at the right place. On this show, I interview various guests from across the miles and share how their lifestyle choices affects their sense of self, their wealth, and most importantly, their health. Enjoy the show. Today, I am very excited and honored to have Andrew Hallam. And when I asked Andrew for a bio, I had to kind of laugh because he just said like financial wellness author and speaker, which like to me just gives a sense of humility, you know, already. It speaks a sense of humility that you have because Andrew's also a best-selling author of your first book was Millionaire Expat, and then Balance is the one that I got a hold of, and you have another book called Millionaire Teacher. Now, I absolutely love Balance because it just, and what a great title, because it really speaks to that. It like to me, in medicine, we have something called like homeostasis, where the body always, wants to go back to that, like that state of balance. And I think your book does a great job of that. It's sort of, why put yourself in this fight or flight state all the time? Like in terms of how you're investing or this frenetic state that many people like put themselves in, almost like a dopamine like craving, Um, no, instead, like just sort of, I mean, I like your one term that you use in the book there, Andrew, like set it and forget it. Just leave your money compound and why go for the high risk when you can just look at what the history has been in the stock market and just invest your money that way. Um, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said in terms of, anxiety, in the mental health and emotional health space as well, just by doing it like that. And it's proven well for you. So let's talk about that. How you doing, by the
Well,
way?
first of all, I'm really happy that you liked the book Balance. It's my latest book. The first book I wrote was Millionaire Teacher in
Mm,
2011, and then followed up with a second edition of that in 2017. And what I started to find really interesting was that I'd get interviewed by a lot of people who would ask me, um, they would ask me about money, obviously, because the book's
mm-hmm,
about investing and a little bit about my personal journey with respect to that. But I found that so many people had and placed what I thought was an overemphasis on money. And it might sound like somebody's listening to this and say, well, that's easy for him to say because he has money now. But I always saw it as a tool. I didn't see it as the be all and end all. I saw it as a component of a successful life, but I certainly didn't see it as the essence of a successful life at all. And so there were certain things that people would ask me, or might be surprised about with respect to my own life, like ways that I could be capitalizing on more wealth. And I would say things like, well, no, I'm not that interested in money. And they would really surprise people. I'd say, no, from the very beginning, I've been interested in living the best life I can. Not money. Money is not the interest. It's how can I live the very best life that I can? And the vast majority of that doesn't come from things that are related to finances. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to write the book Balance to, in a way, explain my overall life philosophy, but then back that up with the science. So everything that I've just said to many people, many listeners will say, well, okay, yeah, that is common sense, but it's also common sense backed by science. And that's why I wanted to write Balance.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up because it's actually something that I was going to ask you about. That I think people are chasing the wrong thing, in terms of like success means, a big fat bank account. And I think that's why a lot of people are sort of struggling in life. It's because somehow, they got that memo that success means having a big bank account. And I'm also very tired of hearing, when people are asked like to define um happiness, I guess, happiness, it's being able to do what I want whenever I want. And I get it, like they're saying freedom in a sense, but I think, they're also saying I need money to get that sort of freedom. And therefore they are like indirectly chasing the money. But I don't like I really don't feel like that is, the ticket to happiness. In fact, we've seen that over and over. I mean, there's a lot of jerks out there that are millionaires and billionaires. And they're not happy. So if you're going to say that again, you're saying that, you know, it was almost, would you say like it was almost like a secondary outcome of following like a different dream or version of success for you?
I think it was always the same version of success. And I think it was how so many people had interpreted that. So when I wrote Millionaire Teacher, I was really showing people how to invest effectively. But investing is just a really small part of what brings us an element of success. I look at success as a four-legged table.
Okay.
So a four-legged table has, obviously there's a money leg associated with that. So the money leg is, okay, do we have enough money to feed ourselves for good medical care? Do we have shelter? Do we have enough money to put some aside for a rainy day or for retirement, and enough money to put some aside for experiential purchases? So things that we might want to do. So money was the first, but not most important, but one of the four legs of the table. There's no first leg of the table. If
Yeah.
there's a first leg, let that be relationships. So money,
Mhm.
solid relationships, health, and a sense of purpose. So those are the four legs of the table. So money, sense of purpose, relationships, and health.
Yeah.
So if you have a spindly relationship leg, for example, of that table, the table is going to crack and the table is
Yeah.
going to fall. Like, it doesn't matter how successful you are financially or in the business world, if your relationships aren't solid and you aren't working on nurturing the relationships you have with loved ones, and that's a relationship too with yourself, because that's perpetually feeding, that's reciprocal,
Yeah.
then you're not successful no matter who you are or how much money you have. And here's how I define, like, when I look at this whole concept, when I ask people why they want anything, like, okay, why do you want to run a marathon? Why do you want to raise your children a certain way? Why do you want to eat that? Why do you want to climb the corporate ladder? Why do you want, if it's $1 million, why do you want $1 million? If you keep digging with the why, people eventually conclude that or come up or rationalize that they want those things so that they can be happy. And ultimately, it has to do with life satisfaction. So
Yeah.
then with the book Balance, what I wanted to do is, well, let's reverse engineer this. If what we really want is life satisfaction. And I mean, you ask someone, why'd you drive a Ferrari? Why do you want that Ferrari?
Yeah.
Ultimately, almost everything we do, well, practically everything we do, will relate to life satisfaction. Donating money to charity, it's much the same thing. It's reciprocal. It feeds us. And so what I wanted to do was look at the science on life satisfaction to see, well, how can we actually augment it to the best of our abilities? And that's where I came up with this definition of success as that four-legged table, where we have money, relationship, purpose, and then health. And we talk about, like, you mentioned that some people will look at success as having enough money to do whatever you want, whenever you want. Okay, that's never been realistic unless you're a trust funder. And if you're a trust funder, where's the sense of purpose?
Exactly.
I mean, you and I both know, so many people who were given everything.
Yeah.
We've either read about them or we've met them personally. They've been given just about, if not everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to their mental state? They don't feel as if they've accomplished anything. They don't feel worthy. It's really, really challenging for them to harness positive mental health when they're in that kind of environment where they haven't been given a chance to establish and build their own pride. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's an interesting definition, because some people will look at that and say, well, I want enough money to be able to do anything I want whenever I want. But that in itself is pretty unhealthy.
Well, which kind of brings it back to you and your lifestyle right now too. And because, I mean, a lot of people would look at your lifestyle and say, wow, to have the ability to travel all over the globe, do what you want whenever you want. So what is your sense of purpose, like you right now? And then also, I want to ask how you sort of like got into this. Like, I mean, like, where was your mindset at the time? Like, who influenced you and all that? So why don't you start off like with the sense of purpose? And the reason why I thought about that, Andrew, is because a lot of people, make the mistake of identifying their sense of purpose with their career. That's the other thing, and then something like COVID happens. And then, that's why everybody's mental health went down the tube in many ways. So what's your why? Like, what's your sense of purpose?
Well, I started out as a school teacher. So there's the thing that was always really driving me, or the thing that fed me, was to share what I knew with other people. Mm-hmm. I just loved that. So whether it was my job or whether it was other aspects of my life, and then the financial aspect was that second element. So while I was teaching, I was also writing. So I wrote an investment column for the Globe and Mail. I wrote for Money Sense magazine. Mm-hmm. I ended up writing a couple of books, and people then asked me to give talks. So I had these two careers sort of going concurrently. The one that was the regular gig, which was the teaching, and the other that I could totally control. I could say how much I wanted to be giving of my time, what I wanted to be doing. And I enjoyed that second element. In 2014, I guess, just to give a little bit of a background too for your listeners, mm-hmm. In 2014, my wife said, let's take a year off. And I was loving what I was doing. Like, I would be going to work and saying to my wife, I can't believe they pay me for this. And I know
oh my God.
A lot of teachers don't feel that way, but I did. Well, it was, to me, I really enjoyed it. So I taught high school English and high school personal finance. So I had two courses that I taught, and it was just, I mean, it was the right thing for me. It was just, and
Wow.
I know that I'm really lucky in that respect because very few people end up uh, finding that, but I did, and I really loved it. My wife decided, let's take a year off, and then 1 year led to two, which has led to 10. But what's continued to feed me in this process is I'm continuing to write, but I'm also continuing to speak. So I give
Mm.
seminars. So in 1 week's time, I'll be going to Barcelona and I'll
Hmm.
be giving a seminar there, an investment seminar for women.
Mm.
I do a lot of these financial wellness seminars where it's not just me up there giving like a canned speech. I like to find out as much as I can about the people in the audience, their challenges, the financial challenges, and the specifics about their situations, and then cater a talk to towards that, but then always have this interactive, engaging process where people aren't just sitting there watching me. They're going through a learning process where I'll ask them to, in some cases, let's say, go through a series of calculations to determine how much money they feel that they need to retire. So I give them a model, like a backwards design model. So
Hmm.
it's really cool to see these light bulbs go on, and that just about every day I receive messages from people, emails from people, whether they're former students or whether they're people that have been at my seminars, uh, expressing a gratitude for that. And that, I guess that's my why. It's just I get fed from helping other people and empowering other people.
Yeah, I think you said that very eloquently. Like, I mean, it sort of comes down to the ability to educate and serve others that are, craving that information. So, and see, yeah, like, I mean, and so, I speaking of high school students, I want to ask you, like, since you wrote Balance, now that's only like it was published in 2022, but like you wrote it, would you say 2021 or
That's right.
oh, okay. So, um, would you say things have changed at all, like in terms of your beliefs or um, your teachings towards investments at all? Like the landscape?
No, I think the same teachings could be applied or could have been applied in 1930,
Okay.
1950, 1980, and today. It's just we have different products that help us facilitate the process and make the
Yeah.
process easier.
Yeah.
But the essence of what I share in all of my books and all of my columns is timeless. It's
Okay.
circumstantially timeless, and that's the part that is uh, both simple and challenging. Simple because the process is easy, challenging because mentally people often think, well, this time it's different.
Oh, 100%. And like that's exactly what I was inferring to. It's sort of like this whole idea like of being the tortoise, slow and steady wins the race. I kind of get the sense that because like I feel like we're kind of a dopamine driven nation nowadays. And you probably don't like, I mean, wow, Andrew, if you would be like a teacher in high schools right now, like I wonder if if you would be as happy and loving your job. Because like just the whole idea of bringing like smartphones into the classroom, I think it's ridiculous. But like I just feel like, you know, like most people are, living like the day-to-day sort of like rinse and repeat and are kind of like um submitted to, using their like always kind of being on, like on their phone, on alert, so much marketing, whether it's the billboards or like TV or like social media or whatever. And it's really hard because they're so used to being on and getting all these, like what I call, pleasure hits or dopamine hits sort of thing. This whole idea of slow and steady, like it's almost like the equivalent of a monster drink versus drinking matcha. It's sort of like I'm going for the monster drink right now because like I'm on and it become very addictive in that way. So I'm saying this, Andrew, because I have three children, three adult children. The youngest is 19, and then yeah, he's 19, and then the next one is 22, and my eldest is 24. And I would say she's more the slow and steady wins the race. It's sort of like she's got this kind of consciousness about her in that way. Thankfully, she just got into medicine, so it's good. I wouldn't want somebody that's, not that way. But the other two, Andrew, like I'm slightly worried because they're growing up in a culture now where I'm going to honestly say making money is easy because they're behind their screens. And like I have both invested in crypto right now. And like I must say they're either holding steady or they're doing well. And one of them also has an online marketing business. And he's also a student of finance. He's getting his degree, but he's had this online marketing business and also doing really well. And the other one's selling kind of his graphic design skills on Etsy. And like the 19-year-old said it to me just the other day, like my father emigrated from the Netherlands, like worked, right? Like all the other like all the other immigrants or whatever, just all his life was work, work, work. And so my 19-year-old realized that. He said it to me the other day. He goes, wow, like he says, boy, it just doesn't seem fair that Opa had to work so hard, but making money is actually so easy. And I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, what do you like? I'm worried. Like, I'm kind of worried that it's not going to be slow and steady wins the race for these kids, and that they have an altered sense of reality. Because believe me, Andrew, they're not putting their money into stocks. Like, I'll tell you that right now, they're not. They know that they can 10x, 2x in all these alternative type of investments, or even investing in startup companies, right? Like, so what, like, what's your view about that?
They can do that until they go broke. So any number times zero is zero. So if you take crypto, crypto is a speculation, but it's not an investment. So an investment, by essence of a rising intrinsic value, is how we measure an investment. And so if you take an apartment building, for example, it's an investment. It has a rising intrinsic value, which can be the rent that you increase over time. So it increases the cash flow. So the intrinsic value of the property can increase. A business is an investment because we can expand it. We can increase the sales. We can increase the prices of the entities. We can increase the profit margins of those entities, and they create cash flow. So businesses create cash flow. Crypto creates nothing. There's no cash flow. So unlike the apartment and unlike the business, it has no cash flow. It's only worth as much as someone is willing to pay for it. So there's no real calculation with respect to that. So for many of your listeners, they'll be upset with this. They'll listen to me and say, well, no, it's gone up so much. Yeah, it has. And it might end up being a viable currency in the future. But currencies themselves don't rise in value. So when the dollar was created, for example, and so we were trading things. So once currency was created for the very first time, and that was revolutionary. A currency? I mean, like a promissory note? that entity did not rise in value. It was just an essence, or it was a tool with which we use to trade commodities with, to
Yeah.
trade
A token.
um, a token. And a cryptocurrency is no different. But what makes it rise is excitement. People are buying it, much like they bought tulips in Holland in the 1600s,
Mm-hmm.
where tulips had risen to the point where a certain multicolored tulip bulb, which essentially it was a virus, but would sell for eventually. I mean, it went up and up and up and up, much like the prices of crypto. Uh, and tulips have a purpose. And tulips are beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and you could sell a specific tulip bulb for the value of a home. You could buy a home with one tulip bulb if it was the right kind of tulip bulb. And so I'm not saying that people that are investing in or buying crypto are foolish, but crypto by definition is much more of a speculation than it is an investment. And so I'm much more aligned with Warren Buffett's thinking on this when he says this is going to end badly. So no, money isn't really easily made today, or perhaps it is short term, but sustainable wealth has always been the thing that eludes most speculators and eludes most people who think money is easily made and built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you see what I mean, though? Like, I mean, it's just it's so accessible. Like you said, the tools have changed for investing, and I think that's what you're saying. Like with the internet, the tools. Like I just I can't even believe what these kids are doing, and they're doing it so fast on their phones, and I know my husband says it's you're gambling. It's just another form of gambling what you're doing, you know. And yeah,
Yeah, it's well, history does repeat itself with respect to this. I'm with this respect to the gambling nature. It's in all of us. I mean, it's the
yeah.
reason casinos are so successful too.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the house wins, but loads of people will still go to the casino because there's always somebody that wins. There's always a
Yeah.
story of somebody who gets out on top and makes an absolute bundle. I mean, you could have taken the 1990s, for example. So you take a whole decade where technology stocks went through the roof. And a lot of cases, these were companies that, they would be gaining 500% a year, 600,000% a year in a lot of cases, far, far, far in excess of what any of the cryptocurrencies have done. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
were just completely going crazy. And many of these companies didn't make a business profit. And so you had this whole era of euphoria. People were buying it because the number was going up. And
Mm-hmm.
so they looked at it as the future. We're going to buy these businesses, solid fundamentals. Many people thought, especially young people, thought they no longer matter. And Warren Buffett said the same kind of thing then that he's saying now about crypto. He says, you really can't buy businesses that don't make money and expect them to continue to rise decade after decade.
Mm-hmm.
So slow and steady does win the race.
Mm-hmm.
So slow and steady is the one that, sure, there may be some people who get out on a high point and never metaphorically venture back into the casino. But for sustainable wealth to truly build and maintain and build sustainable wealth over your lifetime, and that's the time frame each of us need to be looking at is lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're so your daughter is 24,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so her lifetime is her investment duration.
Yeah.
So if she hopes to live to 100, she's got a really substantial lifetime. Even you take a healthy 60-year-old could
Yeah.
very well live to 100. So their investment lifetime is 40 years. And that's the ball they need to keep their eye on, not what
Yeah.
happens today or this week or this month or this year. Once we start paying attention to the short term, we take our eye off the ball, that's when we start to make huge mistakes, emotional mistakes like pulling out of the markets after the markets have dropped or excessively speculating. I mean, it's the main reason Warren Buffett lives in Omaha, Nebraska, like pre-internet.
Yeah.
So Warren Buffett worked on Wall Street. So he worked for Graham Newman and Associates, and it was a great firm. And he said, I've got to get away from the noise. So
Wow.
he moved to Omaha so that he was nowhere near Wall Street. Well, now, as you alluded to really clearly and really well, the noise is everywhere because the
Yeah.
noise is on your phone convincing you to gamble. The noise is prolific. And not only do we hear noise from the media, from stories of people making it big, but you've got your friends, you've got your Instagram connections, you've got all of this creating this cacophony of a distraction.
Mm-hmm. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And yeah, it's to quiet the noise and almost come to your senses and common sense, right? It's I mean, I think like, you know, perhaps like I mean, I've been to Europe quite a few times as well, and I don't know if you find it calmer there, but I personally do not feel like I spent a fair bit of time in Italy, but I just like I don't feel it's the same sort of like distraction as we have here in North America. Like, would you agree?
I think it really depends on where you are. So
Yeah.
I know some really sleepy places in the United States that just
Okay.
feel really calm. Likewise in Canada. And then I know some really hectic places in Europe that feel totally mad and crazy.
Okay.
Um, but the internet is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's ubiquitous. And so
Yeah.
that essence has infiltrated everybody's lives. Yeah, some of what feels to me like the maddest rushed places on earth tend to be Asia. So
Okay, I've never been there. Okay.
large cities in Asia. And I think it really is any place that where you've got a large number of
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and especially when things are changing very quickly. So you have
Mm-hmm.
a place like Dubai. Oh, I'll give you an interesting example
Mm.
because this has got me really thinking. You brought up an interesting point. So I was giving a talk in Luxembourg last month at a Swiss Quote investment conference, and I was speaking to one of the heads of investment relations at Swiss Quote. So with Swiss Quote is it's a giant brokerage. It's massive, and he was saying that in Luxembourg, people tend to invest fairly responsibly and they trade less. So generally, the more trading you do, research suggests on aggregate, the more trading you do, the less money you make. So
Yeah.
there are all sorts of interesting research on this. People that trade rapidly back and forth, we often think of those people as sophisticated investors. And
Mm.
the reality is the best investors are actually those who've forgotten they even have accounts or they're
Mm-hmm.
dead. They're the people that don't trade at all. So the
Mm-hmm.
more you trade, the less over time you tend to make. And so you have a place like Dubai in contrast. So Swiss Quote has clients in Luxembourg, Swiss Quote has clients in Dubai. Now, Dubai is a rapidly changing city. It's rapidly growing. There's a lot of new money there. And interestingly, coincidentally, as a result, most of the clients are what we call churners: buy and sell, buy and sell, buy
Mm-hmm.
and sell, buy and sell. They do a lot more speculating. And all of the research suggests that the more speculating we do, the more churning we do, the less money we make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I everything you said makes a lot of sense. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see, what this, like you say, with this access to the internet and constantly being stimulated is going to do. Because we're just normalizing it, so much.
Mm-hmm,
Like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
mean, again, I want to say I envy your life, but I mean, we all have that choice as well, to do it. We're just, well, which brings me to another question for you. It's sort of, would you say, hmm, yeah, this is interesting because of how we spoke about like what we spoke about so far, but would you say one of the keys to success is allowing yourself to become uncomfortable? Um, like not going down the path of like, routine and being in different situations, like possibly making mistakes. No one wants to make a mistake. No one, and ironically, like people, we also talked about people that, fast trading and things like that, but would you agree with that? Because you often hear you must become uncomfortable in order to get past your fears and advance.
When it comes to overall financial wellness, I think that the first stage of it is always an uncomfortable stage. And I'll explain why.
Okay.
I don't think it's because you are taking more risks than anybody else, but you have to live slightly differently. So, generally, most people today are not financially well. We spend too much on depreciating assets that don't enhance our life satisfaction. We often borrow money to buy those entities that don't enhance life satisfaction, and then as a result, give us debts. Research on life satisfaction and depression suggests that debts equal misery by and large overall. So having debts to buy things that don't make us happy and don't really impress people is incredibly futile, but we've normalized it. So, for example, two people graduate from college and one of them buys, they've been best friends, one of them buys a brand new car. Sure, they can buy a brand new car. They can go to the dealership or they can take out a loan or they could lease it. Now they have a brand new car. Now the other person looks and says, well, they have a brand new car. I want a brand new car. They've normalized an unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so we're all in it. I mean, I won't say all of us, but society by and large. So not everybody, of course, not everybody. It's silly to say everybody, but a vast majority of people are
Yeah.
actually in this. And so to have a financially well life or financial wellness, we actually have to step out of the norm. And that in itself can be, especially in the first stages, I'll say only really in the first stages, psychologically very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that we have to deprive ourselves. And that's a bit of a misnomer where people will say, well, it's all about deferred gratification. So you defer the purchase now so you can be happy later.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of this is that the purchase itself doesn't make us happier. We really don't know what makes us happy. Daniel Kahneman talked about this. He's a behavioral psychologist who won a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. And he said, we do not know what will make us happy. And therein lies the root to so many of the problems. We might think a brand new car will make us happier. But studies on people that drive high-end cars versus people that drive mid-range cars suggest that hedonic adaptability comes into play. So if you're driving a brand new Mercedes-Benz, when you first acquire it, it's quite exciting. But after a while, it just becomes another car. So Michigan State University did a study on this that was replicated in Germany, a place where they love their vehicles more than they do in Michigan. And the same premise held true. So when it comes to deferred gratification, me not going out for dinner 3 times a week or not buying takeout coffee 7 times a week doesn't mean I'm deferring gratification, because we simply get used to whatever it is that we have.
Mm-hmm.
In that process, if we're spending all of our money by trying to keep up this unhealthy lifestyle, this is what leads to lower levels of life satisfaction. So it's a misnomer to suggest that to be financially responsible is to defer gratification, because you aren't deferring anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. So it's more of like let's just be in the moment and experience pleasure because really that's all we have. Um, but I think you're saying, but at the same time, to be financially responsible, we do have to make sound, slow and steady, like investments sort of thing. Like we can't just, you know, like I mean, you're an example of that, right? It's sort of, yes, like we're seeking pleasure as part of our as our lifestyle. We're spending money on not materialistic things, but more on experiences. But at the same time, we're financially responsible because, because of the investments you have made that are just like solid, like proven throughout the years, good, sound ways of investing.
Yeah, sure. It's back to the spending element. It's one of the you'll laugh at this, but when my nieces and nephews were born, one of the first things that I would want to teach them when they were just really little, and I would have them repeat these things to me when they were like 2.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's something like it's okay to borrow money to buy a house, but it's not okay to borrow money to buy a car. And so I would
You
say
would teach
later,
them that at 2 years old.
I would get them
Okay.
to repeat it. It's okay to borrow money to buy a house, but not okay to borrow money to buy a car. So I would actually get them to repeat, which was kind of cute.
Yeah.
So they would walk around and they would repeat this. And then later, to sort of to add this level of nuance to suggest that, it's okay to borrow money to buy a depreciating asset. Or sorry, it's okay to borrow
Oh,
money to buy
yeah.
it's okay to borrow money to buy an appreciating asset. So
Right.
a home,
Yeah.
a business, or your education. Those are
Yeah.
appreciating assets. Depreciating assets, your phone, your
Yeah.
computer,
Yeah.
your furniture,
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Those are depreciating assets. So it's just one of the things that I would talk to my nieces and nephews about. I talk to young
Hmm.
people and I give talks. I give several talks around the world, and I go into schools. That's one of the things I talk about too. And I say, truly wealthy people actually spend a lot less than you might think
Hmm.
on depreciating assets. So in the
Hmm.
United States, for example, when we look at decamillionaires, so the latest data on this was from 2019, so a little bit dated. But when you're looking at decamillionaires, so those with net worth of 10 million plus, the median amount that they spent on their latest car was $45,000.
Yeah, I've read
Now,
that little. Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that in itself is fascinating, because if we went out to the closest parking lot to where you are right now, there
Hmm.
are loads of cars in that parking lot that are well north of 45,000 US dollars.
Hmm.
How many of those people have $10 million plus in net worth US?
Hmm.
My guess is very few, if any.
Hmm.
So it's a thing that we often trick ourselves into thinking um, that this is what rich people do. The reality is that, yeah, there are some rich people that buy expensive cars. Sure, there are. Sure,
Hmm.
there are. But if you round up all the expensive cars in your city and you round up the owners and you gave them truth serum, what you would learn is that very few of those people are actually wealthy. So
Hmm.
most of them are people with high incomes, but high debts and high consumption standards. So when it comes to investing, it can be a very simple process. I mentioned that businesses are investments. So businesses, um, we have more than 7,000 publicly traded companies in the United States alone. And so with those companies, if you add or if you own a sliver of all of them, then on aggregate, you are going to earn the return of the overall US market.
Yeah.
Now, add in diversification so that you have a global and Canadian component, and it is as simple as buying the world's businesses. So
Yeah.
you can do this with very small contributions every month. You can buy a globally diversified portfolio of index funds or ETFs.
Yeah.
Nobody trades those entities. You just own the world's businesses. You will pay a very, very fractional fee to the financial service company that created those ETFs or indexes, but it's very, 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 very small.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the region of 0.05% per year ish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you walk into one of Canada's banks for basically the same thing, you'll pay 2.5% per year in fees.
Right.
So there's the difference between over a lifetime, you ending up with what might be $500,000 or $2 million based on the opportunity cost of the compounding fees over a lifetime. So that's one thing that's really important. And I am happy to say that the internet has had some positive repercussions in that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, very few people invested in index funds.
Yeah.
And most Canadians would walk into Investors Group or CIBC or RBC and they invest my money, please. And a financial advisor would get them into mutual funds that charge them 2.5% per year. Let's put this in perspective. If the Canadian market rises by 5% in a given year, and you're paying 2.5% in fees, you've given up 50% of the profits.
It's crazy.
So 50% has gone to the financial service provider. Now, enter the internet. One of the nice things is the internet has actually shown people that to give you the highest statistical odds of success. In fact, if you have a diversified portfolio of index funds, peer-reviewed academic research suggests that you will beat, over your lifetime, you will beat 90 to 95% of professional traders. Actually, over any decade, you'll beat at least 80% of professional money managers over every decade, regardless of where the markets go, whether they go up, down, or sideways. Over a decade plus, you're going to beat about 80% of them.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is the internet has actually made this information knowable to the world.
Yeah.
And so not that everybody knows it, but a far, far larger contingent of people are fully aware of this now. So that means less money will go to the financial services industry and more money will go to people like you, your friends, your children. More money to people that really deserve it, because it's their hard-earned money that's at work, not the banks.
Right. And you threw me for a little bit of a loop there when you talked about a house being a depreciating asset because, appreciating asset. Yeah, appreciating. Because I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. The real estate market fluctuates all the time. Right now it's not the greatest, sort of thing. You could lose a lot of, if you bought a house during COVID, for example, you could overpaid. But you're probably speaking the long term again, right?
The long term is the only term.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
that's the point I mentioned right from the onset.
Yeah.
The rest is noise. So how the markets or the real estate market performs this week, this year, over a 5-year period, totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
What we need to think of is our lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. And then speaking towards, it's not all a downside to having internet's not the evil step mother or whatever. It's sort of, no, it also brought us the access to robo advisors and things like that, right? After reading your book too, I'm like, Yeah, I'm going to be calling up one of these people and doing it differently because right now majority of my funds are managed. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really, really costly.
yeah,
Not only over your working lifetime, but of course your retired lifetime. So over
yeah,
your lifetime, that's a super, super costly mistake that most of us make. And the nice
yeah,
thing about the robo advisors, and you did mention that, so some of your listeners will be saying, well, what is this portfolio of index funds? What's he
right.
talking about? Portfolio of ETFs? Even if I understand what that means, how do I actually get invested in them? And can I get someone to do that for me? And the answer to
Mm-hmm.
that question is yes, you can. So you could use a firm like Wealthsimple in Canada or CI Direct Investing. CI
Mm-hmm.
Direct Investing was formerly called Wealth Bar, but CI Direct Investing is what they're known as now. There's several of them, in fact, in Canada. They will put your portfolio or your money into a diversified portfolio of ETFs, which are basically index funds. They will charge
Mm-hmm.
a very small management fee to actually make this process possible for you. But it's something that uh, any and all Canadians can do. So
Yeah.
Canadian can open up a TFSA account at 18. Some
Mm-hmm.
provinces it's 19. In British
Mm-hmm.
Columbia, it's 19, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they can start putting money into a TFSA right away. All they need is $1,000 to start.
Yeah.
Some of these wealth, or some of them don't even need that. I know CI Direct Investing needs about $1,000 to start, and then you could set up an automatic payment from your checking account
Yeah.
directly into your diversified portfolio. Could be as little as 50 or $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's like 150 to $3.30 a day ish, right? So it's
Yeah.
really not that much of a commitment. But over time, money compounds like a snowball. And I
Yeah.
said initially, when you're speculating, no matter how big the number is, anything divided by zero is zero. But when you're buying
Mm-hmm.
businesses and the intrinsic value of those businesses rise over time, that's the important part. So it's not that you're going to see your money rise linearly. It's
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to see it rise and dip and rise and dip. But overall, it continues to rise because the intrinsic value of those entities increases over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we look at,
Okay.
actually, I want to add this too.
Okay.
The worst 30-year duration for the US stock market was from 1929 to 1955. To 1959. So 1929 to 1959, because in 1929 we had the big stock market crash.
Yeah.
So we had the markets drop 87%. But remember, I said the most important part is your lifetime. And if we
Mm-hmm.
look at a 30-year term, from January 1929, which is right before the big crash, to January 1959, US stocks averaged 8.24% per year. So that would have turned a $10,000 investment into about $111,000 30 years later. And that was the worst 30-year time in US history. We have to think long term. If we don't
Yeah.
think long term, we start doing silly things and we start speculating. Long term, forget the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. And like even for our nervous systems, right? Like, I mean, like, it's going to just bring us into, again, this like crazy state of like, yeah, unsettled energy. Like, I'm just thinking, myself as a therapist, I see people that are just, suffering like this. Um, so I want to sort of like, how much more time do you have? Because I just want to get into one last thing.
I have time. My wife just poured me another cup of tea.
Oh, well, and it's so funny you say that because I
Thank
want
you.
to I want to bring a little bit of personal and relationship spin to this as well because it's all about, mixing and melding the two. And you mentioned relationships being one of the four pillars, 100%. Um, and if like I've read a few books now, but remind me, you're also very movement proactive, right? Like you're like you love cycling, you love movement, you love exercise, correct?
My whole life
Okay.
I've been really active. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And same here. I don't know what I would do without being able to move. So I could really relate with you there. Um, so how, like, okay, and you also mentioned that you gave a webinar or seminar, sorry, a seminar to, I think it was it in Switzerland to women? So, how do you feel like that's changed over the last, 20 years or so in terms of women, playing a part in financial like investments and even like in terms of like, because I see it, like I see marriages falling apart and women not having a freaking clue about their
Mhm,
investments, right?
mhm.
So tell me a little bit how Paley, you know, how sh- how interest first of all, how interested is she in investments?
The nice thing about that is that she doesn't have to be, and nor does anyone have to be, who builds a diversified portfolio of ETFs.
Okay,
Once
right.
you establish that, you don't need to know about the markets or Wall Street or follow anything at all. So let's talk about my interest for a
Yeah.
moment. I
Yeah.
spend about an hour a year on my investments.
Wow.
If that, if that. Pele, because she's an American, so she can sort everything out with Vanguard. She
Mm,
spends about 0 minutes a year because it's even easier for Americans to have this all set up, a totally diversified portfolio. Actually, it would be much the same as my brothers and sisters. They'll use a robo advisor
yeah. Yeah.
like CI Direct Investing. Zero. They spend zero time thinking about their investments, making investment decisions. They have to do nothing with
Yeah.
respect to that. So then the big part, the important part then is monitoring the spending. And
Yeah.
so, are you spending less than you are earning? So, one thing Pelly does is she tracks everything that we spend. So, she tracks it on an app. You could use an app like Good Budget. We use Pocket Expense. You could use Mint. Many people swear by budgets, and we've never really done that just based on, I think, the vicissitudes of general spending, not just for us, but for everybody. Like if you have a really strict budget and somehow something unforeseen occurs and you have to spend a lot on something, whatever it is, it's a medical thing or a house emergency or whatever. You could feel like a loser if you blow your budget. Budgets can be a little bit like diets. You're like, oh, I give up. But just the idea of simply tracking what you earn and then tracking every penny that you spend on an app. And it just takes a few seconds. You go to the supermarket, you get your bill, you spend 10 seconds just entering groceries, $98.20. It's already categorized. Many people will say, well, my Visa already categorizes it. It's not the same. If there's this moment that you pause and it's like a tactile thing, you actually enter in what you just spent, what ends up happening is a high level of accountability. Like if you're going to Starbucks too many times, and each time you go and you document you're spending another, it just gives you pause and then also allows you to see categorically how much are you spending on takeout coffee. In a lot of cases, it will shock you. And just the accountable notion of having to enter that money in the next time will often make you say, you know what? I'm not going to Starbucks right now. I'm not doing that today. I've done that enough already this week. I'm good with that. Not doing that. So it's a lot like, what Weight Watchers did an interesting study on weight loss. They wanted to see what single variable allowed people to lose weight most effectively. And it wasn't exercise and it wasn't diet. It was simply tracking what they ate. It brings
Mm,
in a high level of accountability. And then when you can see your expenses, you can see if they truly align with your values. In a lot of cases, they won't. You'll see this massive column, and it might be for alcohol. And you're like, I enjoy going out drinks with my friends or buying alcohol, but wait a second, look how much I've spent on it. Do I value it that much? And you can see these misalignments sometimes with your values, and then you're able to cut back on that so that you do align your spending much more with your values.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. You're very fortunate that she's well, I mean, it's a skill that anybody can do, but the fact that she like, I'm not going to say enjoys it because I'm sure no one enjoys it, but like you're like, from a psychotherapist point of view as well, like you're so right. It's like if I don't look at it, it's not there. Like like where I spend my money, and that's why people avoid like looking at their bank accounts, and they avoid tracking, what they eat and things like that. It's sort of like, yeah, it's like, close your eyes, and it's, yeah, that's the problem. So okay, so remind me too, like you were born Canadian? I don't even know.
I was born in England, but raised in Canada.
Okay, in the province of British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How did you meet
Yes.
Paley?
I met her at Singapore American School. So it's a private school. That's where we ended up
Oh,
working. So I
yeah.
started my career church teaching on Vancouver Island in British Columbia.
Yeah.
So I taught there. Then I took a deferred salary leave. So I took a year off to travel.
Yeah.
And then instead of coming back to British Columbia, I ended up getting an email from school principal that I worked with on Vancouver Island, and he had recently taken a job at a private school in Singapore. And the main language, one of the main language in Singapore is English,
Hmm.
and the student body was represented by 54 different nationalities.
Hmm.
So it's the ultimate United Nations type of school as an international school.
Hmm.
And this guy convinced me to go there. So I ended up meeting Pele there.
Hmm.
And so when we got married, we got married six years later. We got married in
Hmm.
2008.
Hmm. So after like traveling together, and because you didn't just stay there and work, did you? Like, did you start the traveling? Like, when did you take that year off then after meeting Pally?
Well, actually, the year off came in 2002, 2003. So that was before I met Pele.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then, yeah. And then I never went back to Vancouver Island, but I ended up going to Singapore instead.
Hmm.
And so that's where I met Pele. And so I worked there, I guess it was from 2003 until 2014 that I worked at that school. And in 2014, Pele said, let's take a year off and travel. And it just ended up just 1 year became two, which has become 10. But it's not like we've been doing nothing at all. So she does so much to help me with speaking engagements,
Yeah.
organizing things. Like if it weren't for Pele, you and I wouldn't be chatting right now because
Right.
I wouldn't have looked at my watch, and we wouldn't have
Yeah.
ended up leaving that other town to get here on our little scooter. So listeners might know this, but to
Yeah.
get to this podcast on time, we were racing a little scooter to get here for the right now, going through these little
Yeah.
Spanish towns. But we made it, so no
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah. I tell you, those women, man, what would we do without them, man? The like, yeah, checking off the boxes. So, no, I appreciate you mentioning that too, that, you are a team. And yeah, you wouldn't have the lifestyle you have if you weren't a team. What would be like the number one, like sort of financial advice you'd want to, not financial, but just like no relationship advice that you have acquired or learned throughout the years that have made things easier in your relationship?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think so many of us will set goals. So we'll set goals um, to educate ourselves in a certain vein, or investment oriented goals, business related goals, fitness related goals.
Mm-hmm.
But how many of us actually set relationship oriented goals?
Yeah.
And actually trying to, I think, just be the best people that we can be. Like the only thing we can control really is our perspective.
Yes.
We can't control anything, but we can control our perspective. So we can all try to be the best people we can be. And in that process, it lends itself so well to relationships, not just with our spouses, but with everyone we come into
Mm-hmm.
contact with. So it's to listen more
Yeah.
than talk, more than talk.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge one. I, it's a question I often ask people is like, if you were to go back and you'd speak to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? And I love asking people that question.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love finding out because you have the whole variety of different things that people say that they would say to their
Mm-hmm.
20-year-old self. When people bring that back to me and say, "Well, what would you do?" I'd say I would tell my 20-year-old self to talk less, listen more, because you don't really learn when you're talking.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. And which brings me to the point that you did not mention, but you stated, I think almost the first thing in the book, in the first chapter was the art of being curious, really, and how much
Mm.
that has um compounded in terms of your relationships as well. Like, I mean, I so agree with that. Like, curiosity, honestly, does not kill the cat. It like it just advances you so much. Like, right, what you said, I'm listening, I ask questions, and then I'm listening, I'm curious, and opening up your perspective too, to have a wide lens of, it's not your way is the only way. It's appreciating others' perspectives and the way they do it, and it's not right or wrong or there's no absolutes, black and white. It just is. So
Yeah, isn't
perfect.
that the truth? That is so much the truth. I think about, um, yeah, as I get older too, recognizing that the world is full of gray. There's no right and there's no wrong. There's no purely good people and purely bad people.
No.
There are good and bad acts,
Yeah.
but the world is so gray, and people are so gray, and circumstances so gray, and cultures are so different. And I think
Mm,
it's important just to recognize that part, be aware of
yeah.
all that,
Yeah.
embrace it, embrace the differences.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, I think that what you're doing right now by traveling and being in all these different places and cultures, like, I think you are, allowing that awareness to come in much more than those of us who just sort of like, put down our roots and, go through the daily same old sort of thing. I think it's very easy to go into sort of like woe is me, ego, everything's like about me sort of situation. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Travel makes it easy, but it's not entirely necessary, in that you can be in the same town, but just start to view that town and even your own neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
through different sets of lenses.
Mm-hmm.
That will bring you as much as travel ever could, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just learning to see things from different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
through different lenses, different angles. And that through that in itself, you're learning a lot, connecting with people that you might not be connecting with, and connecting with them in really cool ways that you never would have expected.
Right, right. Which brings it right back to curiosity again. You can become
Mm-hmm.
curious in your own environment and experience the same thing as you would travel. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Andrew, like, where, like, are you on social media much? Like, where, like, I mean, besides buying your books at any local bookstore or Amazon or what have you, like, how else do people connect with you?
Mm, people connect with me on LinkedIn,
Okay.
more and more on LinkedIn. I post the
Okay.
articles that I usually write on LinkedIn. I have a website at andrewhallam.com.
Yeah, it's a
So
great website.
um,
Yeah.
thank you. So
Mm-hmm.
if anyone is interested in the speaking presentation,
Mm-hmm.
there's a hire Andrew at the top, and there's
Mm-hmm.
an email from which people can use to contact me. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. That's how I got you. So, okay. Well, thanks again for giving us your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening in Spain.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, it was great. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last, because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye-bye.